prior to meeting him, I had convinced myself that I was never going to ever date a man, didn't want to get married, don't want to have kids, leave me the heck alone mentality. And that's how I operated. Maybe on some level, I knew I was getting to the very end of my rope.
Mm.
And then like, it just so happened that he like appeared in my life at a time that I really needed a lifeline.
Well, thank you so much for joining me here today, Kalyca. I'm super happy you're here.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be with you, and I'm very excited.
Awesome. Thank you. To start, I want to ask you, how and when did you know that your partner, Logan, was your person?
To be honest, it was shockingly apparent very early on. We connected on such a deep level. One of the very, very first times we ever actually talked to each other
Oh.
one-on-one. So we were introduced through work at the time. We worked at Oscar Blues Brewery in Colorado, and he worked in the finance department. I was moonlighting in the tap room, but we had never had like a true one-on-one deep conversation. And for some reason, that night when we first did, I felt like my soul had been expanded. And I
Mm-hmm.
felt such a crazy strong connection to him. And the talking that, we did, it just felt so natural and so
Mm.
comfortable. And I felt seen and held and heard. And it did kind of freak me out a little bit
Mm-hmm.
because of the headspace I was in at that time. Yeah. I think prior to meeting him, I had really kind of retracted. I was kind of in like a hermit state where
Mm-hmm.
I'd really pulled away from everyone but my very closest friend. I'd kind of pulled away and retracted from family even.
Mm-hmm.
And was really like practicing a lot of self-isolation outside of
Mm-hmm.
work. I guess that's where the vulnerability comes in, because even in that first conversation, I could feel myself opening back up
Mm.
to life. So
Wow.
there was also this like synergy that we had, and still do, thankfully, that I don't know, I kind of have to believe is maybe like otherworldly, or like this
Mm.
universal energy that we share that's
Woo.
kind of magnetized us to each other. Even thinking back on it now, I have goosebumps all over, but everything around us disappeared. The
Mm.
people, the hustle and bustle, the sounds, like it was just me and him, like connecting on this like deep soul level.
Despite these like super strong feelings, this knowing, this synergy, everyone disappearing, you mentioned like you battled yourself because you didn't want to or you didn't believe it. So I want to get back to I want to us to keep this just aside for a moment. Before we go there, I want to ask you, how did you feel before you went to see him? Do you remember that? Was there anticipation like before this first, I guess, date?
Yeah, to be honest, I had sworn off men for the rest of my life, and I was like adamant. So I was in a really like unhealthy, what I would consider toxic relationship for many years as I was younger. I left that relationship in 2012,
Mm.
and then I didn't date again for over 4 years when I met
Mm.
Logan. And prior to meeting him, I had convinced myself that I was never going to ever date a man, didn't want to get married, don't want to have kids, leave me the heck alone mentality. And that's how I operated. Like going to meet and hang out with Logan the first time, I didn't think anything of it in the very beginning, because
Mm.
that wasn't even something that had crossed my mind. Like he wasn't
Mm-hmm.
even an option, I guess is how I would describe it. I actually have a really like poignant memory um of that time, because I had told myself like, nope, not gonna happen, like he's not
Mm-hmm.
your type, like all these
Mm-hmm.
storylines, right? And I remember calling my mom. I was on a run one day, and I always called my mom when I was like outdoors, out enjoying life. And I remember asking or telling her, like, oh, there's this guy who has expressed, interest. He's like kind of trying to date me. I'm not sure how I feel about it. He's not really my type. And I will never forget what my mom said, because it was so like profound. She said, given your past experiences, maybe it's time for you to open up to a different type. Like mom, just like mic drop, right? And then she went on to share her story of how she met my dad and how they had become lifelong companions. And her statement to me was like, are you looking for like a thrill, or are you looking for a lifelong companion? And, I'll always remember that conversation because it was really a turning point for me to kind of slow down and be like, wait a minute, maybe like this is something that could be really good for me. Especially now my mom actually passed away in 2018, and just having her be kind of woven into our love story, like makes it so much more meaningful for me. So what's really interesting is that he and I, both being in the headspace of, I don't want to date anyone, showed up to those first few dates of like 100% authentic, no holds barred. We both looked at each other and we're like, do you want kids? And I was like, nope. And he's like, nope. Like that was the first, like one of the first things we talked about.
Oh,
right?
Wow.
Like a lot of other folks, like, certain things like don't get brought up until later. And then it creates a massive like rift between them. Or it was just kind of like we put all of our cards on the table and we were like, this is who I am. So if you don't want to talk anymore, like it's cool. I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And reflecting back, that was the first time I'd ever done that in like the early stages of a relationship.
So with this authenticity piece, and like you were able to just freely say who you were, what you wanted, how was that different? I guess like, because you mentioned you were in not so good relationship for many years. Can you tell me how you were different back then? Like, who was Kalyca at that time?
Love this question. So I started dating my old ex, when I was young. I was like 18 years old. And I think that I was definitely in a place of like low self-esteem and, uncertainty, anxiety, trying to figure out who I was, like, and I kind of fell into that relationship. Well, he was a former military person, and he was pretty like significantly older than I was. And somehow like our relationship dynamic right out of the gate was like very codependent. And I went into it thinking like, oh, he needs me to help him like through, because he just had gotten back from Iraq. And like, I kind of took on the like, oh, I can be this like savior for him or whatever. And I think in that process, being young, I really like lost myself. Everything I did was like to try and please him or appease him. And I felt like he kind of just took the reins on everything, and I allowed him to. So it created this like power struggle. So I think just having had that experience, the power of it is, I knew like, well, first I thought I knew I was never going to be with another man ever. But then I knew exactly what I would not do again. Like I made such a strong point to not relive a lot of those really negative habits and patterns, because I saw where they led.
Yeah. Oh man, I can totally identify with your story. I was in a similar relationship, like totally codependent. Same thing. He was well, I don't want to say damaged goods, but he had an alcohol problem. He self-harmed. I think he was like borderline personality disorder. Like there was a lot of things. and I made it my mission to like help this person. And, I just went into like this caretaker rescue role,
Yeah.
which I was repeating from childhood in a way, with just childhood dynamics that kind of made me do the same thing. And yeah, it all became, just like you said, all about him, making him feel good, and then adjusting my personality to him as well. Like, what is going to make him mad? What's going to irritate him? I remember I was such a I'd like to say funny person, and I am now, and I love making jokes, and like, maybe sometimes inappropriate jokes. So I would do that because that's who I am. And I remember he would get so upset. So I stopped doing that. And that by stopping that, I was like suppressing my true nature. And that was just the entire relationship, adjusting myself to appease, like you said, to meet his needs. And by the end, it was like, who am I? It was, I actually like had no sense of who I was. And then when the relationship ended, it was like somebody had pulled the rug out from underneath me. It was like the great abyss. And same with you, what you said, I'm never going to get into this situation again. And same thing. I was like, never, ever, ever again. So, but sometimes you got to be in that dark place, really hit rock bottom to understand like how you, like who you are, how you want to live your life, and kind of where you want to go.
Yeah. Wow, that's such a parallel experience, right? And I'm sure as a relationship coach, you have seen a lot of parallels, but that's like very striking to me how everything you just described was like spot on to for my experience too, where it was like I felt like I was shrinking away, like
yeah. And like my health suffered as well. And knowing what your story is, I want to ask you about that in a moment. But yeah, like it's like our bodies in these situations, and like I always come back to that in relationships as well. When we meet a person, when we're with a person, like how our bodies are responding. What was your body doing, and what were you doing during that time?
whew, yeah. I mean, I had some unresolved trauma that I had never dealt with. Um, and I think that kind of did play into how I showed up to that old relationship. I think I kind of showed up as a victim, as less than, like that was what was in my mind. But I think over time, yeah, just losing more and more of myself. I felt like I had no control over anything. And I think that being kind of a tumultuous time anyways, as a young woman, like as a young person. So for me, the coping mechanism that I kind of fell into was an eating disorder. So I remember kind of having just an overall like unhappiness with my body. I felt that way for a long time. And I finally hit a breaking point when I was with him in that relationship, where I think a big motivator was that I didn't feel like I had control over anything, and I felt like I had lost myself completely. So the behaviors that I started engaging in kind of filled that void for me, and kind of created like like a dopamine loop, because I would restrict, like really restrict my calorie intake. And then I would feel like a sense of accomplishment, or a sense of like, oh, I'm taking control back. Right. Like, and that just kind of like perpetuated. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of things kind of played into that. And I have fortunately overcome that struggle. And I've been in recovery since, honestly, right around the time I met Logan.
Okay.
More on that soon. But yeah, I mean, I went through a recovery program, and, I've done lots of therapy, and I've worked with a coach, and I'm proud to say that I no longer engage in those behaviors. But I do think, giving myself some like self-love, to just know that like, oh, that was the only way I knew how to cope with what was going on inside of me at the time.
So the time when you left that relationship, when you got out of it in those, was it 4 years you said
Yes.
till you
Yeah.
met Logan? Yeah. So there must have been, because I mean, when you met Logan, you were at this point where you were able to open up. Like something had happened already that got you to this point that you were able to, yeah, like attune to each other. And like he was empathetic, compassionate, attuned to you. So in some way, you must have been empathetic and compassionate towards yourself to be able to receive that. So I wonder, when you left that relationship in those 4 years, what helped you, like what helped you heal that and get to the point where you were able to invite your soulmate in?
It was great for me to be out of that relationship because that
Mm,
was for sure a destructive path like
mm-hmm,
no other. But then, being out on my own kind of had its own set of challenges. But I guess there's probably two things that got me through it. Like I was
mm-hmm.
kind of just surviving. Like I was surviving when I met Logan.
Yeah.
But it was my best friend who was my lifeline. And then I also fell in love with running.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
running actually was a way for me to take my power back. It felt
Mm-hmm.
like, right? Like it
Mm-hmm.
was something I was doing for me. It was something that felt empowering. I honestly don't even know what it was that made me
Mm-hmm.
say yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as soon as I got to know him, I could see a future with him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that was the first time in several years that I saw any future for myself or
Mm-hmm.
had any hope at all.
Wow.
Maybe on some level, I knew I was getting to the very end of my rope.
Mm.
And then, like, it just so happened that he, like, appeared in my life at a time that I really needed a lifeline.
So tell me about the battle that ensued, um, that you had after that initial meeting, where all the, like, you knew, a part of you knew, like your gut knew that this was right, but your mind was fighting it. So tell me about what that was like.
Yeah, I think it was fear, definitely
Mm-hmm.
fear of being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Still like being kind of, I was honestly kind of in a relationship with my eating disorder, which sounds weird, but like that's kind of how they talk about it in recovery is like
Mm-hmm.
it kind of swoops in and like takes all of your attention, all of your energy, and kind of like leeches onto you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a part of it is I was like, oh, I can't be in a relationship because there's not going to be room for me, this thing, and a partner, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I also was like terrified of sharing any of that kind of stuff with
Right.
a partner. But again, Logan being who he is, being so strong, grounded, compassionate, and just someone that I immediately trusted, like I pretty much instantly opened up to him about everything.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. Like things I had never told anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about my eating disorder, which was like so shameful to me at that time, and something that I didn't even talk to like my parents about. Like
Mm-hmm.
it feels like he kind of just like came in and like pulled this sheet of shame off of me. It was just like, oh, you don't need that anymore. Like, and then I was like, just like, oh, I can tell you everything.
Uh-huh. So you must have felt so safe around him and trusted him quickly.
We had this thing in the first couple of years of our dating. I had this like thing that I would say, like, oh, you saved my life. Like,
Mm-hmm.
without you, I don't think I would have been able to fully recover. Or like, I was always adamant of like, you saved my life. And he would always be like, no, like, you saved your own life. I just like was here to hold your hand and support you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy because it has started to come full circle where looking back on it now, I had to have the ultimate act of self trust to open up to him.
Mm-hmm.
And that in that moment or in those moments where I was able to expand, to be vulnerable, to trust myself, to know that, like, no, these feelings are legit, like, trust yourself. It wasn't even a conscious choice, but it's just how it played out. But like, I
Yeah.
think that act of self trust, like, reconnected me to me. big time. I also remember early on, because he showed up so differently than anyone I'd ever met, like almost this like enlightened being that, and of course now like knowing his parents, knowing his mom, like, oh my gosh, like just the way he was raised, like everything, and who he is as a human being, it's all part of it. But like I remember reading the book Attached. I don't know if you've ever about attach. I'm sure you've read it, you're a relationship coach. But yeah, I remember at the time I had met him, and my friend recommended that book Attached. And it was all of a sudden like, oh, okay, I get it. He's secure. He's a secure, attached person. Like he like, and I think being in that dynamic, it like brings you kind of up to that level in some ways where like you learn how to be securely attached and how to trust.
And I think too about like what, you know, these amazing things you say about him, like we mirror the partners that we attract, we mirror the person that we're with, like we're always on a similar level. So even if at the time you didn't see that about yourself, that's what he would have seen as well, like that same like enlightened being, like he would have seen that because like we mirror each other. So there was some of that in you.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of cool to think about like these amazing people that we attract. It's like, oh, I must be pretty amazing too.
Yeah. He saw what was underneath all of my shame, and he saw like who I really was. And maybe that's part of it too with my healing journey, is like having him love me that way, no matter what, has like reflected to me like, oh, like you are worthy of unconditional love, and you can also give that to yourself. Like if someone else can treat you that way, like you can treat yourself that way.
Yes. Yeah, totally. You were in that phase of kind of battling yourself, like you don't want to get into a relationship. What was it eventually that made you kind of surrender to it and be like, okay, let's go?
He asked me, would you like to go have sushi with me?
Mm.
And in a moment of like kind of that feeling of like losing total control, I wrote back like without my brain, like my heart jumped in and wrote back, I'd love to send. And then I had this sheer like panic moment where I like almost started crying and was like, what did I just do? I can't go on a real official date like that. For like a split second. But then it was like, no, you said what you said without thinking about it because it's the right thing.
Exactly.
Because you are supposed to go on this date. And that kind of, from that moment on, I just trusted the process. And I was like, okay, take your head out of this thing. Like, follow your heart, go with it.
That's
and
so powerful.
Yeah. We kind of did the dance for a little while. Again, him being so incredible. Like I was working through a lot of stuff about intimacy. And that was not a part of our relationship at all. Like we didn't take it to an intimate place in that way until like 6 months into officially dating. And he had that much like care, consideration, respect, for me and my process. So again, that just speaks volumes to like who he is as a person.
And to both of you as well, like for you to even to allow yourself to take that time and not put pressure on yourself and not be like, I have to do this so he likes me. That's like, no, I need this. I have troubles with this. And for him just to be like, I got you.
Yeah.
Like, that's amazing.
Oh, I know. I'm gonna start crying. Yeah, such an incredible human. Oh my gosh. I feel just like so fortunate all the time. But yeah, you know, we did the dance for a while, and then his birthday is in early April, and we had planned to go to Glenwood Springs together. So we had a plan to go to the mountains, and like it would be our first kind of couple getaway type thing. So he ended up not going, but I went. I still went.
Girl, yes.
I took myself on that weekend getaway.
I love that.
And that coincidentally was the weekend that I put it was like almost like I flipped a switch, and I put my eating disorder behaviors behind me. And I made a conscious choice to say, like, the road ends here and I'm never going to do those behaviors again.
Wow.
We went on a hike for his birthday. And on that hike, something happened. Like, again, I feel like our souls were like, maybe they were like reconnecting with each other, or I don't know what it was, but I think by the end of that hike, we both just knew again, like, but this time beyond a shadow of a doubt that like, no, we have to pursue this. We're both going to be so sad if we don't give it a shot.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. And you saying you went anyway on this trip, and then like, oh my God, that's such an act of self-love. And like, when you think about a person that's codependent, the codependent person, like your past self would have stayed at home and would have been like, I don't know, just thinking about that person or whatever, just mega focused on someone else. But in this moment, like, that's such an empowering decision that you made. Like, I'm going anywhere because I deserve it. I deserve this getaway. And like, I'm good enough to go with, I'm worthy to go with, even if he cannot join me. And then to make that decision in that time frame to be like, this is the end of my eating disorder. Like, oh, and then to have that hike afterwards where the soul, like, it was like, that was exactly how it had to happen for you to like just show up for yourself in that way, and then your souls could like
I think you're right. Like, I'd never actually thought about it in that way, but yeah, it was this like me taking these little steps to this like massive breakthrough. Yeah, I think I really was, even though I had convinced myself I wasn't, I was ready to move on with my life and be kind of like reborn.
Yes. And like your heart and your soul knew that you were ready, you know, way ahead of your mind. It's like your mind still, it was like running behind a little bit, like, let me catch up.
Right.
Yeah, but it did. Yeah, that's awesome. So where are you at today? And where are you and Logan at?
I am really proud to say that I've, like I said, back, gosh, that would have been like 2015, maybe. I put those behaviors behind me and I've never gone back. I think there's always stuff that we carry with us. There's always going to be hard days and things that we work through. And, but fortunately, like, I've continued my journey toward healing, and I've met a lot of incredible people on that path. And open myself up to doing stuff like this, where I get really vulnerable and share parts of it, which the old me would have never imagined. But so I'm doing really well. I'm currently a business consultant and business coach, which is a blast. And I am still running, but I've also kind of reformed my relationship to that. And it's like a really joyous, healthy thing that I do with my spare time. And then Logan and I, oh my gosh, we are closer and more in love than ever. We have maintained just that feeling we had when we first met, that we knew that we were each other's forever soulmate partner. And I will say, like, the best gift we've given each other is to be fully transparent and authentic, and to have like hard conversations when they need to be had, and to honor ourselves while honoring each other. So we're going super strong. We've built such an amazing life together. We live together with our dog. We do tons of adventures together. We love to be outdoors. And we support each other through thick and thin and everything in between. And I think we both feel very lucky to have found each other, and we both feel very supported in our relationship. So yeah, I think for anyone listening, like, I don't know, my biggest encouragement is like, if like, trust yourself, right? Like if you get to a point where you have that feeling of like, is this it? Like, just trust yourself. Like because I can't imagine how different my life would be if I would have shut that off and ran, like, which was my original inclination. So
Yes. Yeah. It just makes me think of this quote about in order to love someone else, you have to love yourself first. Or this thing about, having that self, you got to work on yourself before you get into relationship. What do you say about that? Because to me, it sounds like you kind of put this on its head and kind of
yep.
did your own thing. So what do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I understand the principle behind that, right? Like, oh, you can't love someone else fully unless you love yourself, but I did not have that experience. For me, it was the opposite because I allowed someone else to love me, which really helped me see that I was worthy of being loved. And like I said before, it helped me, like, it almost modeled like, oh, this is how you should treat yourself in a way. So I don't know, I say that like there's no right or wrong order for any of it. And I think especially my encouragement to other women is like, I think a lot of times we can kind of, the connection to our intuition, we can kind of like sever it somehow, right? Or like we get bogged down by a lot of other messages or distracted by things. But it's like on a core level, like, what is for you,
That's right.
sometimes you have to slow down, sometimes you have to strip things away, but like, deep down, and like listen to that and tap into that and find some, like, maybe it's a coach or maybe it's a therapist, but like find someone who can help reconnect you to that too, because that was the turning point for me. Like that, like I said, that shift of like, I don't know what's going on and I'm just going to go with it, was the best thing I've ever done.
And then also whatever connection we can have to our body. Like for you, you started running. For me, I started doing yoga. I think anything that brings us closer to the sensations in our body will help us better listen to our intuition.
Yeah, the more I can slow myself down and tune in, the better like everything in life is. I'm more present. I can make better decisions. I can listen. I can know when my intuition is trying to get my attention. And I actually have one more if I can.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, is there anything that I haven't asked you yet that you really like, I need to say this?
Yeah, this just came on really strong. This goes alongside, cultivating self-trust. And maybe this is part of the like love yourself first mentality, where it's like, value yourself enough to raise your flipping standards. Because for so long, I was like, had the lowest standards for what was acceptable treatment of me. Have the highest standards for yourself, because I promise that like there is someone out there who has it all, who is brilliant, grounded, supportive, strong, kind, courageous, empathetic, like attuned, is handsome and fun and charismatic and just everything you've ever wanted. Like, so do not settle for any less. And I know that sounds like a cliche, but like, man, I cannot imagine if I would have settled and like started dating some bar fly before meeting Logan, like how horrible it would have been. So,
yeah, totally.
Like, keep your standards high, wait as long as it takes. It will be worth it.
Yes.
Yeah, when you find your own Logan, you'll just be the happiest person in the world.
Yes. So ladies, to find your own Logan, raise your standards.
Yeah.
And like, you can, even for me, like in the last, even 6 months, I've raised my standards, because I'm like, I want a high value man. I'm a high value woman. I need to start acting and being and feeling like one. So, it's like wearing clothes that make me feel like a high value woman. It's like washing my hair more, like wearing it down more to feel like a high value woman. It's painting my nails. It's like I do a lot of things that just make me feel better. like you said, go on that vacation by yourself, like do things for yourself that you would want someone to do for you as well. Like just treat yourself like a gosh darn goddess.
Yes. Heck yeah. I think there's power in that because I think it's also magnetizing in a way, right? Like
Totally is. Yes. And also the support system you have around you, that's also raise your standards. Because like what you said when you met him, you had your sister and your best friend. So you had that, high value people in your life. So it's like, look at your life and your circle of friends. Are those high value people? Because that's all also going to be a reflection of who you're going to attract. So that's something I had to do as well, is like reevaluate what was working for me and what wasn't. Like, where was there negativity coming in, or just that heavy energy that I didn't want in my life anymore. And then it was about filtering that out. And sometimes that's hard. But also I feel just awesome where I'm at now. So yeah, raise your standards and continue to keep your standards high.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And I'm so happy for you too. I feel like you have this radiant energy that you're exuding.
Thanks. That's awesome. Thank you. And Kalyca, final question. What song or music piece are you dancing to nowadays?
Ooh, good question. Gosh. Okay, so there's this artist Max, M-A-X, that I've been really vibing to. He's kind of poppy,
Okay.
but there's definitely some songs that I like to dance to.
Oh yeah. Do you have one in specific or?
Color Vision.
Color Vision? Ooh, I love it.
Color Vision. COLOUR Vision by Max.
Okay, cool.
Yay.
Perfect.
I need to hear this playlist of yours.
Yes. I'll share it in the show notes so you'll get it. How, if someone that is listening resonated with your story, and I'm sure there are many women that are going to be resonating with what you shared with us today, how can they best get in touch with you?
Yeah, I would love to connect with anyone. I mean, like I said, I've been so lucky to have the support I've had in my life, but I know that not everyone is that lucky. So if I could ever pay it forward and be supportive of someone else, I would be honored. So anyone can reach out to me. Probably Instagram Messenger would be the easiest. My handle is just Kalyca Zarich. That, or I'm on Facebook, same thing, Kalyca Zarich. So.
Okay. And I will spell that out in the show notes. So the link will be there for everybody.
Awesome.
Well, it was such a treat chatting with you today. I feel like there's a lot more that we could go into and like explore, but this was just lovely. And thank you so much for sharing your story and being vulnerable and open with us. And yeah, it was a pleasure talking to you, and so happy to hear how things have evolved for you and where they're at for you. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It was so amazing getting to know you a little bit better. And yeah, I look forward to listening to your show.
Yay. Thanks.